Before we dive into Pastor Steve coming back up for our session on shepherding and creating a culture of shepherding, I want to show you a video. We talked about this morning a little bit, how one of the ways here at College Church that we've been able to celebrate what God is doing in the people that are in this environment who are going out into the marketplace and living this out is by capturing their story to share with others. And so J.D. Collins is someone who is a part of our church here, who has a unique position in the marketplace, and his story is one that's been inspirational to us, and so we want to share that with you today. So I want to introduce you to J.D. Collins.
My name is J.D. Collins, and I am now retired, but I was the National Coordinator of Officials for 7.5 years and refereed at the Division I level across the country for the 20 years prior to that, men's basketball specifically. So at the Division I level, there's about 800 Division I officials across the country, but I also had responsibilities for Division II and Division III. So when you add the teaching and training piece of the job to that, 3,500 maybe, impact on 3,500 people. After becoming a Christian, I think that it was part of my DNA growing through your jobs. And when I became an official, it became very apparent to me that that was a secular world, more significantly than any other I've been in. And the environment there was not anti-me or anti-being a Christian, but there was a lot more space for the liberal ideas would get more airtime than my Indiana roots, growing up on a farm, do what's right, be kind, you know what I'm saying. And trying to have an impact, but not knowing if in fact you are. And I think if we as believers in the workplace, and I quite frankly really don't care what workplace it is, if we care for others the way Christ would care for them, if we do the right things, if we're in the right place, showing up, quite frankly. A friend of mine, father was passing away, 3-week process, referee friend, and I'm checking with him every day, hey, how's it going? And it was getting near the time, and I get there, literally am with them for 45 minutes, his father passes, and I was just there. I didn't say anything magical, I didn't do anything magical, but I was just there. And the reality is, whether you have 100 people or 1,000 people or 10 people, you have a responsibility to mentor them in how you act your life. And hopefully the reflection is that of Christ, so that when the chips are down or when things are too great or whatever it is, they have a conversation and you can talk into it. This past fall, my wife was going to have a surgery on a Thursday. I was going to stay with her for 2 or 3 days to make sure she was good. And a guy that I've mentored from Indianapolis called me and said, hey, I'd like you to come to the Big Ten Officials Association meeting on Friday night. We'd really like to have you there. And I'm like, not happening. My responsibilities are here. So that was on a Saturday. On Monday, he called me, he goes, hey, can we talk about that, the Friday evening thing? And I go, sure, I ain't coming. He goes, no, we're naming an award for you, like in your name, and we'd really like you to be there. And so they have this award called the J.D. Collins Get It Award, and that's a phrase I would use in officiating all the time. On the floor, he gets it, she gets it. They know that you need to communicate. They know positioning. They get what we're supposed to do. But it's an annual award that will be given every year in my name, which I'm like, that's really cool. So I get there, and of course they do the little dog and pony show, and I get up there, and then they hand me the award, and I see the words on it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I look underneath it, and it has Philippians 2, 3, and 4. So they didn't ask me. Didn't ask my wife. Didn't ask anybody. But the fact that they knew, not only to know that Scripture is important to me, but that's my favorite Scripture. Look around. There are people all over the place. I walk by 10 people walking in here that got stuff going on, big stuff. And a smile, a kind gesture, an open door, anything you can do to show those people kindness marks you different than everyone else. And when they, fish through all of their contacts and who do I call? I'm telling you, the kindness will always make your face come known. And so the quote from Gene is, absorb chaos, create calm, provide hope. I abused it in refereeing, teaching it just constantly. Now take that message and wonder why people are texting me now or why people are calling me now. Because they saw something different. I think we should do the same thing no matter if it's building rockets, refereeing, pastoring a church.
I'm going to sit for a few minutes, but the backstory with JD, Jeff introduces me to him, and so I meet him a few years ago, and we're sitting in a Cracker Barrel, not far from here, and he's just going on. And he's saying, yeah, I know about the shepherding thing and on it. I just can't do that kind of stuff. You don't understand. The NCAA is what he calls the most secular organization in America today. Well, what does that really mean? And he just starts unloading his griefs, right? Well, that conversation ends. Then I would say about 3 months ago, we're in the same Cracker Barrel, and he starts telling me this story. And he gets partway through the story, and he starts to cry. Of course, I love that. Anytime an official cries, I'm like, that's a good day when a ref cries. Yeah, I didn't think that was possible. He gets partway through it, and I start laughing, and he's like, what is so funny? And I said, dude, we sat right over there at that table, and you told me 4 years ago that you could not make a difference in the NCAA, and they name an award after you? That's no difference. So the takeaway from this is you're making a difference even if you feel like you're not making a difference. Success doesn't always feel like success. So here it's just staying at it, doing the right thing, the good thing, empowering others, and leaving to God the results. Does that make sense? Now, I thought what we do is take a few minutes at the beginning. I want to get into draw some pictures in a minute, but I thought what we do at the beginning is just to maybe take some of the questions that were like gnawing at you. Would you like to raise those? We've been looking over the cards. I can read some of the questions if you'd like to, or I can just take them from the floor. Like, are there business loans available through us or others? I'm not sure. Can I get more information? Trent, are you here? Are there business loans available? Who asked the question? Is it? Oh, okay. Shall we move on? You don't seem like you're interested. Yeah, this is a great one. How do we help retirees who don't have formal marketplaces find a market and be part of the movement? Don't leave this group out. They could be a powerful component. Can I get an amen on that? Can I just maybe I'll defer to you first and then talk a little bit about, yeah.
Volunteer at the hospital.
Perfect. Yep. Uh-huh. I'm sorry? Neighborhood associations. Perfect. Yeah. Other ways. Couple more.
I know in this community we have a senior center downtown, and they would love to
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Let me segue what I want to talk about. One of the things that I do every few months is I hang out with guys from social science over at IWU because they study, I think, kingdom principles from an entirely different vantage point, and that information is valuable to me. I think truth is where multiple disciplines overlap. And so in one of the conversations that we had recently, they were talking about a study that they had done on what they call impulsive behaviors or addictive behaviors. How do we break the cycle of impulsive or addictive behaviors? After a little while of research, they came to a conclusion, and what they discovered is that addictive behaviors came from a lack of self-control. Now, this is the moment where every non-academic goes, no duh. They said, but self-control, the lack of self-control came from a problem of stress. Now they were starting to make some ground. To deal with impulsive or addictive problems, then what we need, they said, are not more mechanisms for managing self-control. We need mechanisms for lowering stress. Because when stress is down, self-control is up. Make sense? So then the study turned toward what are the predictors of a person with less stress. They found 3. 1, that person feels close to at least one other person they've been with in the last hour. 2, that person has a sense that there is someone in the world who cares about them. 3, they were simply physically with that other person in the last day. Those are the indicators. Now, that doesn't seem earth-shattering to you, except it starts to tilt the problem of impulsive and addictive behaviors more towards relationships with others than it does towards self-control within oneself. It says when the relationships are in order, self-control is higher and the person's life is more balanced. When there is no relationships or good ones, then self-control tends to dip and the person becomes vulnerable. Last week I had breakfast with a handful of others and David Brooks, who's a writer for the Atlantic and Washington and New York Times. And Brooks was telling us that the reason he wrote his most recent book, which is How to Know a Person, was because as a journalist, he looked around the country and he found almost every domain. When you get to the bottom of the problem, it comes down to a breakdown in relationships. Whether it's government, whether it's business, whether it's medicine, whether it's courts and law, there is a disintegration of relationships that used to be the glue that holds a culture together. That glue is fastly diminishing. Are you tracking? So we have to start thinking about pastoral care as a highly relational exchange, not transactional. It's relationships that need working on. About 10 years ago, I read a study by the World Economic Forum, and they said that the problem in the world right now was a problem with leadership. But they said it wasn't that we had too few leaders, it was that we had not the right kind of leaders. And so what was needed was a different kind of leader. So that sent me going back to the scripture to say, well, what does the Bible teach us about leadership? And what I found, you guys, surprised me. Throughout the Bible, the word that is used to describe a leader is the word shepherd. And when the Bible refers to shepherd, it is not talking about a pastor. It's talking about a leader. We found that in the ancient Near East, early times, everyone from Sumerian kings to Babylonian deities, to Egyptian emperors, to tribal leaders, called themselves a shepherd, which seemed like a pretty antiquated term. But when I looked into it, it's because they said the knowledge base and the skill set that shepherds have is exactly like those of a good leader. They have the ability to adapt in a moment to territorial or terrain changes. They have the ability to lead animals that don't want to follow. They're resourceful. They know where the food supplies are. They know when to be in front of people and then when to drop back and get behind people. So they just have a lot of natural, intuitive abilities. And so it was no wonder that all of these leaders in biblical times compared themselves to shepherds. They would say, I'm as good as that kind of person in what I do. Are you still there? Yes. This is going to start change. So then we started looking into what do shepherds do? And what we found is that there were 4 practices, almost cover to cover in Scripture. We'll save you the footnotes, that identify what the practices of a shepherd are. One of those is know. Second is feed. Third is lead. And the fourth was they protect. We found that these 4 things kind of work in a cycle. You can start with any one of them, but you have to include all 4. Just so we stop and get everybody on the same page, this started to explain how it was, why it was. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. He was not saying, I'm a pastor. He was saying, I'm a trustworthy leader. That passage in John 10 hits all 4 of these qualities. Remember it? Jesus said, the shepherd goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow because they know his voice. He said, those who enter through me come in and go out and find good pasture. I know where the food is. He said, the shepherd is not the hired hand. When the hired hand, or when the wolf comes, the hired hand runs away, but the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Are you there? So you find Jesus move in and out of all of these 4 qualities, not always in the order that they appear on the board, but all 4 qualities are easily found in Jesus' short piece about what shepherds do. I find this in Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I want nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not afraid, because you are with me. Are you there? Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You find it. The same thing is true in Jeremiah's vision where he says to Israel, I will give you shepherds after my own heart. He doesn't mean pastors. He means I will give you leaders whose heart is like my heart, who will do with the people what shepherds always do. Ezekiel said the same thing. God will give us shepherds who are leaders, who see us and see the nation as the shepherd sees sheep. So I started to look at it and go, my goodness, I wonder if so much of the tension in the climate today is that people are looking for a shepherd and they always get a leader. And they don't have language for it. But what they're wanting is a shepherd. Look, every shepherd is a leader, but not every leader is a shepherd. A leader is followed because they are great. A shepherd is followed because they are good. Leaders wonder, what is this person doing for the organization? Shepherds wonder, what is best for this person? Leaders expect employees to sacrifice for the organization. Shepherds lay down their lives for people. Started to feel to me like there was room for a whole different paradigm. You heard Ryan refer to it a few moments ago, a way to bring both the practices of the workplace and the obligations of spiritual care into the same calling. Let me walk through them quickly. We'll just unpack it a moment, and then we'll leave room for conversation. One is to know. To know is more than just the knowing of names. To know is to know the family's names. It's to know what a person is afraid of and what they hope for. Their insecurities. To know a person well is to know things about that person they don't even know about themselves because they haven't told you that, but you can read them when you're with them. To feed is to add value to someone's life that they would otherwise not have if you were not part of their life. It's to have a vision for what makes this person a stronger person. And then to periodically bring into that person's life observations, content, conversations, things we've seen, that you know will improve their spiritual life. But it is to have a vision for that individual's life. It's getting clear by now, isn't it, that you can't really do that until you know them, because you don't really know what you need. Third is to lead. To lead is simply to challenge someone or take someone to a place they would not go otherwise. But it's good for them. They need to go to that place. to protect someone is one of a couple of things. One is to take a bullet for them, to stand up for them, to defend them when they're getting attacked or opposed. It's to come alongside them and as an advocate say, I will vouch for this person's character in this crisis. I know things about her that you don't know. You can trust her. We were in a meeting once and a person here was going through an issue at home. And I was watching this, it was a few years ago. I was watching people on the board kind of start to draw back and say, do we really, do we not, kind of a thing. That was the moment where I sensed a call to say, no, this is where you sort of take the meeting over and say, look, you don't know the details. The best thing you can do for her right now is leave her alone. She will be fine. You don't need to take disciplinary actions. This was not her fault. She doesn't need to get off this board. We've got this covered. Let it go. It's that moment where I can feel the meeting moving against her. She's not in the room. And there's that moment where you're like, wait a minute, this is where you stand up boldly, as the guys just said a while ago, and take a bullet for someone. The second thing is, there's going to be a moment where that person starts to wander off. They start to stray. Their spiritual fervor gets a little less hot. They're going to know who the shepherd is by who comes looking for them when they are in that crisis. When they wander off, said Jesus, the shepherd is the one who leaves the 99 and goes after them. People, which leads to the first observation. People everywhere have shepherds. They just haven't formally called them that. And they're not always good people. So part of this is building relationships around these four things. How do I get to know this person better than they sometimes know themselves? How do I add value to that person's life? How do I challenge them to go places they would not otherwise go? And how do I search for them or take a bullet for them when they're in a crisis? This is an opportunity for people to find their shepherds. And that's really the next observations. Shepherds never find sheep. Sheep find shepherds. When I rolled this out in front of the people for the first time, the first thing we did was we all started saying, oh wow, who am I gonna shepherd? And so people started writing down names that they were going to take on. And the mistake that every one of us was making was we were looking to shepherd people that we wanted to shepherd. But the way human relationships work, the people that you're supposed to shepherd are already close to you. They already come to you for something. They already ask you for advice right now. They just don't call it shepherding. And if they ask others, they weigh what you say a little heavier than what other people say. Those people are already in your life right now. Probably all that needs to be done is just pull back and say, wait a minute, who is already in my close proximity? I meet them every day or about every day, and they tend to come to me more often than others, asking for some kind of guidance. Those are the people who have identified you as a shepherd, even if you don't feel like it, even if they don't call it that. So it does no good to name them. It's better for them to find you. So this started a process in College Church of how we were going to send people from this church into the community into dozens of different disciplines with a vision for doing pastoral care with people in the marketplace without even telling that person that's what you're doing. Like one person said, yeah, I've got 3 sheep, and I told them, you're my sheep. You're like, it's a bad idea. We didn't say it. We just said, we got to rethink this, which means it's a bad idea. It is better to just identify who comes to me, who's in close proximity. I'll get multiple chances in a week to see them, to influence them. Let me put them on a list, and I will start to pray for them. So the first thing we did was to identify. That was critical, because the tendency among people in churches when they gather is to nod, and then when the service is over, do nothing. So just asking people, stop the service and let's write down names of people that we think God has already put into our circle of influence. Now, the number became critical. We found through research that our influence tends to wane in a series of concentric circles. So the number of people that you can actually know on a deep, intimate level, their fears, their dreams, their desires, that number through sociological study is somewhere between 3 and 12. If it's more than 12, you're better than Jesus. So the rule of thumb is to aim low. Let's keep it manageable. So we aim for probably 3 to 5. Beyond that, the number of people that you can know but not very well, they say, is about 50. One study said after 54, you've lost touch with that audience. So the talk about, well, I'm going to go to a small church because I'll know everybody. Well, if it's larger than 54, it's already too large for you to know everybody. So the second allows us to know more people, but what I want you to see is the influence lessens with 50 than it does with 3. Beyond 50, there's a number of about 200. The number of people that we track on Facebook is around 200 on average. Now, that isn't really knowing them. That's just getting data whenever they post it. But it's not having sustainable conversations. And then beyond that is a number that we run into on a daily basis, and that number's around 500. But again, the rule of thumb is we have to choose, are we going to have less influence with more people, or are we going to have more influence with fewer people? That's a huge decision. And there's not a right and a wrong way. Some of you who are wired to feed people believe this is my strong suit, so I'm going to get up and I'm going to speak to the masses. Well, that's perfect. We can continue to do that, and I do it too. Just understand that your sermons can't really guide people to the place they need to go. There's nothing wrong with your sermons. Don't be offended. They're amazing. They're just not, that's not what preaching is built to do. In order to make more impact, we have to lessen the number of people. Are you tracking? I'll hurry. 2, build trust. The difference between a leader and a shepherd is where their authority is located. The authority of a leader is located in their vision or in their position. But the authority of a shepherd is located in their voice. People follow shepherds because they trust their voice, not the vision. When people decide, who will I follow, what they're actually asking is, who do I trust? And I think that trust revolves around three components. One is that person's agenda. Now, keep in mind, the question is not, am I doing all four of these things? The question is, do people perceive that I'm doing all four of these things? Because that's when they're actually following. The first thing that incentivizes trust, as I said, is agenda. And I think the question at the bottom of that is, am I here for you, or are you here for me? That's the bottom line. When I show up to work tomorrow, am I here for you, or are you here for me? And if you say, well, it's both, they know they're there for you. You have to show them through acts that are counterintuitive, opposite what they expect to see, that they are not first there for you. You are there for them. When they trust that, they build the trust capital. Are you there? Second, character. The question is, how does this person wear power? Do they follow through? Do they have a good heart? That's what they're trusting. And three, commitment. When something goes wrong in my life, because I know it's going to, because I know things about my life that you don't know. And when the wheels come off, are you committed to me? Or are you committed to what I can provide for your organization? Am I more than my talent? Do you love me for more than my ability to produce? So when I can no longer produce, I know you were there for me. How you doing? Are you okay? Three, pay attention. Throughout the course of our relationships with people, they will run into things or suffer things, and they will try to hide it from everybody else because there's shame. The shepherd is attuned to that person because they're constantly praying for them. And it is in those prayers that we learn how to look differently at that person. And we notice things we would not have noticed if we were not mentioning their name in prayer. Prayer heightens our sensitivity to things and to people. And Jeff will talk about that more tomorrow. And then finally, the fourth one is bring them together. One of the things that shepherds can do is they can convene, and they do. Jesus said, I have sheep that are not of this flock, and I must get them also, and then there will be one flock and one shepherd. And so he is always looking of ways to bring his people together. So what shepherds will do is they'll look for opportunities to bring people with influence that they influence into the same room. Okay, end of the story, and then I'm going to just go to some Q&A and let you, because it's after dinner, and I'm well aware of that. There's a heaviness in the room. And it starts about right here, right? So we talked through this some years ago in college church, and we said, what if we could commission people in our church from every discipline, ordained or unordained, to practice the disciplines of a shepherd? We just said to them, we want you to write down 3 to 5 names of people already in your sphere of influence. You're going to start praying for them. You'll pay more attention to them. And when you do, you will learn to know them, feed them, lead them, and someday protect them. So let's get as many people as we can to do this. And what we found was on the last day, I didn't preach through these. This, you would think this would be the outline of the series. It wasn't. This was actually the outline of the series. It was a step-by-step process of how to start with 3 names and actually do something with those 3 names. And at the end of the series, we had 388 people come onto the platform from every discipline, saying, whatever my job is, this is my work. This is the work inside my job. And you guys, it was amazing. We have a big platform, but it was swarmed with people. And then we got up at the end of that with all of them up there, and we thought, why don't we commission them? Like you would a pastor. That's where they ordain people. So Chris was in our church at the time. Chris wrote vows of commissioning, which I have somewhere here, which we actually used on that day. And all the people facing us, I think it was Chris that actually led this, kind of read the pastor's part, and the people responded to the vows of commissioning. And then as soon as that was over, man, I started hearing stories from former laity all over the place. One guy in finance walked up. He never walks up. He walks up and says, I've done finance my whole life. Now I know finance is just the subject. This is the call. Another guy whose picture you saw was principal over a high school, secular high school, and he goes in with a room full of 40 teachers, and he draws this on a board. And he says to them, you're teachers, but that's just your job. This is your calling. These are secular. They'd never had that language before. So then he said, I need you to go back and take apart all of your course syllabus and show me how you're going to incorporate the 4 marks of a shepherd in every course that you teach. They go, what? We don't need to do that? I'm principal. You need to do that. You'll see a guy come in just a moment who teaches in Huntington High School, Matt. And Matt says he goes into the gymnasium and he's leading at that point, the girls' basketball team. And he's in the gym. No, he was assistant. And he's in the gym, and they have a rally. They're getting ready to send them into regionals. And all of the coaches are talking, telling their stories. And they hand the microphone to Matt. And Matt calls himself a, quote, Moses-like figure. And so he doesn't want to talk in front of people. And he takes the microphone, and he says, well, all the words have pretty much been said. So I just want to say that I come to this gymnasium every morning, and I walk this track up here, and I pray for your sons and your daughters, and I pray for them by name. They matter to us, and they matter to me. Then he starts quoting scripture. He sent me these were like in the minor prophets. I was like, pastors don't even know the minor prophets. This dude is dropping verses from the prophets. It's amazing. And he's quoting them by memory. Rally ends. Matt goes back to his office. He says, my phone blew up. And I thought to myself, I just did it. I just crossed the line between church and state. This is over. And what it was, you guys, was a string of texts coming from the parents who said, my gosh, I had no idea anybody was praying for my kids. If you got time, can we talk? Ain't that an amazing story? One last one. Trent, he was here. He's gone now. I've told this in other places as well. One of my favorite days was he talked about convening people, having a Bible study. And what I do is I make site visits. I go see people at work. Generally, I say, don't introduce me. My job is just to watch what's happening here. I want to read the room. I want to learn how the gospel fits in this culture. So I go into a room that he's in with 22 people. 15 of them are not part of any church. And Trent gets up and he starts drawing something on the board about confession and forgiveness. We'd talked about it the day before in church. And he starts drawing the diagram on the board. And when he's halfway through, a woman in the room says, I have a question. She says, you speak of confession. I grew up Catholic. And she said, when we were going to get married, we had to go visit the priest. And the priest told us if we didn't do these, this is what we had to do in order to get married. She said, I basically, when the session was over, thought the priest can stick it. She said, I left that office, and a few years later, our marriage fell apart. And she said, recently I just pulled out this list, and the priest was right. If we'd have done what he told us to do, the marriage would have survived, but it's over. And now I'm married to another person, and this marriage is starting to disintegrate. And I don't know what to do. And I'm thinking, gosh, they don't talk like this in Sunday school. Nobody does this, man. You hide that kind of stuff. And Trent, this guy that doesn't know what he's doing, he just walks up and writes, Jesus forgives. Then he comes out to the person and says, first, is there any way you can reconcile with that priest? She says, no, he's virtually excommunicated me from his church. No way back in. He says, is there any way you can reconcile with the people that you have hurt? She said, maybe, I can start there. Trent just says, whatever you do, remember this, Jesus forgives. You can start with that. I just remember sitting in the corner of this room thinking, that person will never go to a pastor or a priest to tell them that. You just don't say that kind of stuff. But she had a pastor. She was 1 degree away from a pastor in the boardroom that day. And it gave her a chance for finding faith. Now imagine that scenario multiplied over hundreds of places where everyone is 1 degree from a shepherd. Now you got something. Now you can pastor people who never go to church.